All right, this is episode number 57 of the Inland Empire Workers' Compensation Lawyer Livestream podcast, and today we're discussing what makes a big workers' compensation settlement in California. A lot of people have this question who are injured at work: how much money am I going to receive to settle out my workers' compensation case? And that's what we're discussing today. But remember, it's general in nature only. It's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, if you've been injured at work, you need to consult with a workers' compensation lawyer. Dial our Injury Helpline. That's 844-984-8414. And make sure you listen through this entire discussion so you know what to watch out for to help you maximize the amount of money that you're going to receive in your workers' compensation settlement. What are the two ways that a workers' compensation claim can settle, and which one are we talking about today?
So two ways in which a workers' compensation claim can settle is either a stipulation with request for award, and that is done when you have reached a permanent disability agreement and you're ready to settle your claim, get what is owed to you per the guidelines for your permanent disability, and also get future medical. That's one way. I think the way we're talking about today, Alex, is through a compromise and release. CNR is usually what it's called, and that way closes out your claim completely. Is that correct? That's what we're discussing today?
Right. So for our viewers out there, George is explaining the two different ways to settle a workers' compensation claim. We're talking about the lump sum way, which is a voluntary agreement that you can enter in with the workers' compensation insurance company to get a lump sum of money. And how big is that money going to be? That's what you're interested in learning, right? And that's what we're discussing. You can also settle it by stipulation and award, which is basically leaving your future medical care open. That's going to get you less money. So that's not what we're discussing, although it can close that way, and some people choose to close their claim that way. What makes a big lump sum payment is what we're discussing today.
Right. There's a lot of factors that come into play when you're going to settle a claim. I think that it's very important that we give out this admonition to our viewers that not every claim is the same. And that's very, very important to note, because you might have a friend or family member, someone that's known to you, that had a workers' compensation claim, and they're like, hey, this is how much I got. And that's fine, but you have to take a lot of things into account, and whatever their experience was, it might not pertain to your current situation. So we have to say not every case is the same. Most cases are differently. They have a lot of different parts to them, but there's also a lot of different issues within your claim, a lot of things that come into play and that can affect the value of your claim. So what's one thing that can affect the value of the claim, Alex?
I think the most important factor to a big settlement is having a workers' compensation lawyer. The adjuster's not just going to give you money because you got injured at work, or, well, they're not going to give you very much.
Right.
They have to be concerned that the amount of money they're going to have to pay out if they don't settle your case is going to be large. And that's what leads us to the first point, is exposure.
Right.
You know, how much is the insurance adjuster thinking they're going to have to pay out on the claim in the long term? What do they think they're going to pay out? That's going to lead them to the point where they're going to want to offer money to the injured worker to close out the claim. And I mentioned two things, exposure and timing, because workers' comp is a system that provides a bundle of benefits to injured workers, and those benefits can be used up over time. And when you get close to the end of the claim, if you've used up a lot of those benefits that we're going to discuss, the exposure is smaller, meaning that the adjuster might not pay as much money towards the end of a claim as they might pay at the beginning of a claim. And it might be because you've collected a lot of the benefits, and it might also be because the adjuster has a clear understanding that they don't have to pay as much out.
Right.
So it may be at the beginning of a claim, the adjuster is evaluating the exposure, and there's a lot of benefits left to collect, and that can make a bigger workers' comp settlement.
Yeah. I think it's important to give this analogy. I was employed with a large workers' compensation defense firm, and so I handled a lot of the files and defended a lot of the insurance companies. And a saying that they have in the defense world is a closed file is a good file, and that's not good for the injured worker. So in other words, for the insurance company, closing the file is the best for them. They want to close a file at the earliest stage in the file, and they want to pay the least amount of money. But if you think of it this way, the insurance company is looking long term. The longer the file is open, the more cost they incur. So they're gonna have to pay for their attorney fees. They're gonna have an attorney on file every hour they bill. They're gonna have to pay for doctors that you see. The longer the file's open, the more doctors you might have to see, the more appointments, the more physical therapy, the more treatments, the more testing. So they're looking at a lot of exposure. That's what Alex is talking about when he means exposure. How much does it look like they're gonna have to pay in the long run? When they look at this exposure, they want to cut off the bleeding fast. They want to see how big of the wound it is. And I'm not talking about the injured worker. I'm talking about the claim. The claim you can think of as a cut. Is it gushing blood? Is it a lot of payments going out in the beginning? Or is it drip? Is it a little paper cut? When the insurance company looks at this, they want to cut off the bleeding. They want to stop the bleeding. They don't want to pay these monies to doctors, to all these other people. So they say, hey, we'll offer you this much money to settle your claim out right now completely, to stop going to the doctor, and this is how much we can offer you. Now, as Alex mentioned, without an attorney, you don't know these things. You don't know what their exposure might look like. You don't know what this claim might be. So you might take $2,000, $5,000. That might be okay money for you at the time, but you got to understand that with an attorney, you can easily, not always, disclaimer, it depends on who your attorney is, depends on the situation, but you can easily double or triple that amount to $15,000. And that'll easily not only cover your attorney fees, which is 15%, but will also leave a lot more money in your pocket had you not had an attorney. So quick example, if you settle on your own for $10,000, then that means you get $10,000 in your pocket. But if you settle with an attorney and they get you $20,000, now you have $17,000 in your pocket, even after you pay attorney fees, okay? So that's what we're talking about here, and we're talking about exposure. And that was a little bit of analogy of, using a cut metaphor on the bleeding and how they want to make it stop. But if you want to understand it that way, it makes a lot of sense, right, Alex?
That makes a lot of sense. It's a great analogy. And it's like if you have a lawyer, the lawyer knows how bad they're bleeding.
Oh, yeah.
And can negotiate with the adjuster on that basis, rather than if you don't understand the full exposure that your claim might have, then you're not going to be able to convince the adjuster to pay you more. And I want to make one important point that a lot of people make a mistake. A lot of injured workers make the mistake. I need to get a settlement quick. I need to get a settlement now. Like you mentioned, the insurance company's trying to close claims. They're maybe offering low ball settlements at the beginning. Right. And the more desperate you appear, the adjuster is going to play on that desperation and try to get you to take less in order to save more money on the claim. So having a lawyer on your side and having a lawyer between you and the adjuster helps stop that desperation that the adjuster maybe sees and lets an attorney negotiate on your behalf. So one thing that makes a bigger settlement is having a lawyer.
Oh, yeah. And, just from personal experience, and obviously I'm not going to get into any specifics, but I did have a client where they didn't want to proceed. They were feeling better and they didn't want to go through any more doctor's appointments, and they were pretty much done with it. They were injured, but they had gotten better through time. So the insurance company was offering $5,000. Because I worked for the insurance companies before, I know the pressure points. I know how to say, well, listen, you're offering $5,000. That doesn't even cover the neutral doctor. Not to mention more discovery when we have to go talk to the doctor and ask him questions through interrogatories, go through trial, go through hearings, your attorney. So you're going to spend a lot more money just going through discovery, even if you do it in the end, than if you offer my client a decent settlement. So my client wanted to settle for $5,000, but because I pushed the pressure points, because I showed the insurance company what they already knew, but maybe they were forgetting, or they thought that I wasn't going to bring up, or they thought my client wasn't going to know, because I pushed those pressure points and said, listen, let me draw this map for you. If you want to continue this, you're going to end up paying a lot more. They ended up paying my client, I believe, $20,000, from $5,000 to $20,000 in a matter of days, just because, I kept on going back and letting him know what their exposure was. So to me, Alex, and we discussed this, before we started working on this, exposure is the word. I think that's the most important word when it comes to how big is my settlement going to be, right?
So the insurance adjusters have to base their settlement offer on something.
Right.
And they have to document in their file what the total exposure might be and that they're making a prudent decision to pay you out. And you need that insurance adjuster putting more things in that file, and that's what an attorney can do for you, including the legal costs of defense. When you have a lawyer, George mentioned, they have to pay their lawyers. If you don't have a lawyer, then they don't have lawyers. It's just the adjuster.
Right.
Lawyer's an expensive item on your claim, in addition to all the benefits that you can receive. Hearings, going to the court, doing all of those things to enforce your rights, costs the insurance company money.
That's correct. And I think when we do talk about exposure, I will mention that exposure is the most important word, but exposure can mean nothing if you don't do your part. So I do want to say that it's not just that there's exposure.
You got to be injured.
You have to be, well, you have to be injured, and we have to prove that you're injured. But how do we do that? If you're not going to your doctor's appointments, if you're missing doctor's appointments, if you're pushing them back, if you're not participating in your own claim, then although there might be exposure there, there's no way to prove that. And the insurance company is saying, your client doesn't even care. Why should we? Now it's very, very hard, even if there is exposure, to get you the full value of your claim. So please keep in mind that it's very important that even if you have the best attorney in the world, you do have to do your part, and you have to participate in your own claim in order to reach the maximum settlement for you, yourself and your family.
Absolutely. Participation is key.
Yeah.
So get a lawyer, participate in your claim.
Right.
It's going to make a bigger settlement.
Yeah.
Now, there are other things that make a big settlement, things that you can't necessarily change.
Yeah.
Like how injured you are is going to change the settlement. Whether or not you need surgeries, whether or not you've had surgeries, how long are you going to collect temporary disability benefits? Because there is a set amount of benefits that you can receive under workers' comp. There's no pain and suffering in California. And in exchange, every worker on a no-fault basis gets a certain determined set of benefits or a bundle of benefits. And we've discussed those on prior episodes. You can go back. We'll put links to those episodes in the comments below, or in the description below. We'll put links to those in the description below. And you can go and watch our other episodes on the different benefits you can get. But maybe, George, we should discuss a few items that would potentially increase and make a bigger settlement.
Sure.
Specifically, maybe multiple injuries, multiple body parts.
Right.
One of the benefits that you have is temporary disability. And the more treatment you need, the longer you're going to be on temporary disability, the more exposure the insurance company has with that particular benefit.
Right.
And if they think that you're going to be off for the full 104 weeks, which is the maximum temporary disability period that the insurance carrier is exposed,
Yep.
and it's earlier on in the claim, you might be able to get the adjuster to give you a large portion of that right up front.
Yeah.
But if you can't convince them of that, then you don't have a big injury. And a big injury is not just like, oh, you have a broken arm. That is a big injury.
Yeah.
But how much medical treatment is required for that injury? Because that's another benefit you get if you're surgical, if you're not surgical.
Yeah. So as Alex was explaining, you have temporary disability benefits. Now, who signs off on those? Your doctor. So once again, you might have a temporary disability going on for the month, and this temporary disability might look like it might extend to a year or 2 years. That's money that the insurance company is going to have to pay out of their pocket to keep you going and keep you recovering at home. Now, once again, tying back to what I just said, if you went to the doctor and they put you on temporary disability, but then you missed your next 2 appointments and your temporary disability is taken away because you missed your appointments, now that exposure is looking less and less like they're going to have to pay it, because you're probably not going to go to your appointments. You're not going to get certified. That money is not there. So once again, tying that back into, just because you gave a great example, Alex, participation is key. Because even though you might have that exposure there, if you don't participate and do your part, then sometimes that exposure can be taken away, or it might just evaporate.
The doctor's not requesting surgeries.
Right.
So the insurance adjuster's not putting those on their list of items that are increasing the exposure. There's a lot of things you're not doing if you're not participating. There's a lot of items that you're missing out on potentially to negotiate with the insurance adjuster.
Right.
And you can get better if you have a surgery. So if you settle before the surgery and you settle earlier on, you might get more money than if you have the surgery and get better. Because not only has the insurance company paid for the surgery already, but you've also gotten better and you've lowered your permanent impairment on that body part.
Right.
Because the doctor's made you better. And this is something that injured workers need to understand with their lawyer in consultation as to zig or zag one way or the other on settlement. Is the adjuster including those things in their evaluation of your claim? And if they're not, well, time to move forward and get the surgery, because you're not being paid or compensated in your lump sum for that. How many surgeries you have and how many surgeries you might need, how many surgeries you've had, those also affect the value and the amount of your workers' comp settlement.
Yeah. The last thing we want to talk about is, med legal. It's called the panel qualified medical examiner. That's a huge cost for the insurance company. And that is a right that you have. So it's not like they can get away from paying that. However, they can get away from paying that if they include it in your settlement. You have the right to give away your right and your rights. So if it's early on in your claim and you're feeling like you might be a little bit better, you might not want to go to a neutral doctor that's going to say that you are better, because then your claim value diminishes. So you might want to maybe talk to your attorney about settling your claim early on. And that cost of that medical evaluator, that med legal, the QME, you can use that exposure of that potential cost in the future to let the insurance company know, hey, listen, you won't have to pay $5,000 for the qualified medical examiner. Or maybe even, I saw a report that a doctor charged like $7,000, $8,000 because of the pages they reviewed.
Right.
So if you could take that cost and negotiate with your attorney and the insurance companies and put that cost and some of that cost into your settlement, of course, that's going to increase your settlement as well.
Right, like record review. If you have 25,000 pages of Kaiser records from past injuries that you've had, and those are overlapping on the same body parts that you're claiming, that's going to be a huge record review for the qualified medical. And you said examiner, I call it an evaluator. It's interchangeable. It's a QME. It's your second opinion. You could also have multiple body parts and systems that you allege. A lot of people, when they get injured at work, they only allege the arm, but it turns out that they also have a foot problem from a cumulative trauma. And we've discussed this before. George and I have discussed adding additional body parts, adding additional mechanisms of injury. Those can make your workers' compensation claim bigger because you got more med legal to do. Yeah. And you could have other specialties. Maybe you have a hand issue and you got a foot issue. You need a podiatrist and you need a hand specialist. And those are secondary treating physicians. Maybe they try to do a QME where you do a general ortho, but you might have a right to have multiple QMEs for those specialties, especially if you also add internal issues. Right. So having multiple injuries to multiple body parts, multiple body systems can increase the number of QMEs that you need. And when you have a lawyer alleging all those things on your behalf and working the system in a way where the adjuster believes that you're going to get those things, now all of a sudden what turned out to be potentially $2,500 of exposure for one QME turns into a $10,000 exposure on your ortho QME with an internal and a psych QME too. Yeah. And secondary treating physicians, which then starts to make the settlement much bigger. So what we discussed at the beginning, timing and exposure, are the nuts and bolts of a big settlement. Yeah.
So Alex, you say potato, I say potato. You say I'm injured, I say call us, right?
Absolutely.
What's the number?
844-984-8414. That's the Injury Helpline if you need legal advice after a work injury in California. We get calls from out of state. We're happy to talk to you, but we can't represent you unless you're injured in California. You might live out of California. Yeah. You might have been injured in California. We can help you.
Definitely.
So give us a call, dial the Injury Helpline, watch the other videos on our channel to get more general information on workers' compensation in California. We hope this video has been helpful.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.